All right, welcome back to a bonus episode of the Blasters and Blades podcast. So, hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies, a place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. So, without further ado, let me tell you what we're doing right now. We're getting ready to release some of the archive that we found from when we were the sci-fi shenanigans. We're going to get those up there for the posts that were brought down. We thought you might enjoy them, and so without further ado, let us roll that beautiful. Oh wait, they're going to sue me. Play it.
Hey, all you crazy sci-fi fans. Time for your daily dose of insanity over here at the Sci-Fi Shenanigans podcast with your hosts, J.R. Handley and me, Chris Winder. Just two nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions. A place where the sky's the limit, space is the place, and nerds run the world. Without further ado...
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Sci-Fi Shenanigans podcast. Today we are conducting our final interview with authors from the Backblast Area Clear, a military science fiction anthology. Today as our special guest, we have Navin Weeraratne. Close?
Navin Weeraratne. You're definitely better than the last time.
Woo, I've been practicing. All right, so welcome, Navin. And then from here on out, we're just going to call him Navin because I can pronounce that. And he probably mispronounces Handley, so it's all fair and loving.
I know,
right?
I can't say Handley. You're Handley. Okay, so.
Right. All right. So Navin is a miniature painter living in Sri Lanka. He doesn't paint miniature people. He actually paints figurines. So don't expect him to paint your midget friends. I know that's not politically correct. I was trying to be funny on the fly. Don't hate me. All right. If you don't know what that is, he gets paid to paint all kinds of figurines for tabletop gamers so they can kill hundreds of hordes of undead zombies and whatnot, together with his amazing and beautiful wife, Thilani. Is that right?
Yeah.
All right. I was making sure I got close to pronouncing it. She's probably shaking her head at me. He hosts geek and nerd events in the Sri Lankan community. He's one of the founding members of the Sri Lankan Comic Con and generally a brilliant chap. He has 5 cats and 2 dogs and cannot justify the amount of times he spends playing Kerbal Space Program. I've seen some videos of that. That looks fun, by the way, if I wasn't afraid of getting addicted.
It is amazing. I have learned far too much physics than I would care to admit to, which I've used in my writing. So from that game.
Well, it's useful and it's kind of fun. They did a video where they had one of the actual astronauts work through that game to talk about landing. You shared it in your Legion of Science Fiction Writers Facebook group. That's where he posts all his science.
I'm not so sure how well he did in landing though.
The guests crashed, bounced off the atmosphere.
Yes,
and so I'm sure that the astronaut was just laughing. But anyway, there's some good stuff there if you want to talk about the science, and he's learned apparently about it playing this computer game. So did we get everything right, Navin? Do we miss anything?
I think so. Yes.
All right.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So the second part of the introduction, dear listener, is how we found them. So I actually found Navin through a mutual acquaintance, and I'm probably going to pronounce this one wrong too, but Untitled Weeraratne. Okay, can you pronounce that for us?
Oh, it's so good. I'm going to make a WAV file of that and make it my ringtone or something, or just play it at the parties. It's Untitled Weeraratne. All
right, and I just call him Yuta because I can pronounce that, and he goes with it for me because he's nice like that.
Yes.
But when we interviewed Yuta about the lit RPG subgenre, because he's an uber fan of that subgenre, and through that discussion, your name came up, specifically your Burning Eagle novel. Since that introduction, we've chatted over the Zuckerberg machine, where we've engaged in many funny discussions and fun ones too about life, politics, and science fiction. We don't always agree, but we're able to have fun and keep it civil, which is a rare treat these days. We've interviewed him about that series because it sounded so interesting. So go ahead and give it a listen. As always, that will be linked in the show notes. And so that is that. So we're when I reached out to you to do that interview, was that the first time you had heard of me, or had you seen Yuta and I going at it?
You actually sent me a message on, I think it was Goodreads, And I never look at my Goodreads profile. And I saw
that's
it like
right.
later.
That's right.
Yeah. And I just come out of this weird relationship where I'd worked with this one business partner who screwed me over for everything I owned. So I was a very, very untrusting phase of anyone I didn't know. So I was completely unprepared for how warm and supportive and like go team everyone is in self-publishing. So it was Udanja who went first and went, hey, there's a whole world out there and like these people are pretty cool and they'll teach you stuff and let's all work together. And like, are you sure it's not a trick? Like, yes, Navin, I'm sure it's not a trick. Like, oh, okay, you're right. Everyone in the world is nuts around me. So it was a growing experience for me to find that someone online far away may want to talk to me for no other reason that he wants to talk to me, and like we can make some sweet stories together. So yeah,
it was your Zelam story. I was going through a zombie phase, and I found that story, or sort of organically.
Did you try it?
I bought it. I haven't had time to read it because I've been doing ones I'm going to review. But I've decided first I was trying to only read like sci-fi, like definitely it has to be Mill SF if I'm going to write a review. And I realized that I could probably, as long as it's sci-fi in general, I can get away with the reviews on my website as opposed to, because it doesn't have to be that tied in with the branding. So I've loosened up.
I think you'll enjoy it. Because it'll tell you a lot about Sri Lanka and a lot about things about Sri Lanka that Sri Lankans don't really want people talking about. But I totally got away with in the story. So,
but yeah, so I was curious about the story because I saw that, and then of course I saw some of your linked posts where you had your friend with the who had gotten sick, and you were like standing there with the picture of the book. So
yes,
it was the mosquitoes, right?
For those, a friend of mine, dengue hemorrhagic fever is a real concern out here. And the government does not talk enough about it. They want to play down how dangerous it is and how widespread it is. And a friend of mine caught it 3 times. And that's really insane. I think there are only 3 or 4 strains of dengue virus in the world anyway. So he can't catch it any more times. And I would give him such a ribbing for it because it's dangerous, right? It gets worse every time. And Zealand was actually considered for a National Writing Award. And they did a small video beforehand with me where they talked about Zealand. And they asked me, why'd you write it? And I said, well, I need something to market another book, which you guys have not considered for the award. So I put this out, I worked on it for a month. And I have a friend who caught dengue 3 times. Like, you know what? Something's going to be done about this. People catch these disease and no one takes it seriously. Let me write a book about this and make fun of them. And I did. So.
Outstanding. So it's on my list I keep a list of books I want to review for my website, and it's on there. So we will have to bump it up some on the list. But we did promise the listeners that we would keep this quick and dirty. So for your anthology story, could you tell us what your anthology story is titled?
Yes, it's called The Battle of Purple.
It's an awesome title. I like it. It's simple. So what's a basic synopsis of that story, The Battle of Purple?
Well, The Battle of Purple is set in a universe where humans are no longer the top predator. We're not top of the food chain anymore. There are things we've created. There are artificial intelligences which have gone off and iterated themselves to higher and higher levels. The singularity has happened. And these post-human beings are out there in space as well. And as much as we're spreading through space and colonizing and finding old alien artifacts, what we're running into that are opposing us are not so much aliens, though they're there. It's our own children, in a sense. And the Battle of Purple, what's happened is they've found an alien artifact that they want to look into, but it's in a system controlled by a hegemonizing swarm post-human intelligence. And the military special forces team has to go in there and do a rescue, and they've got to deal with what may or may not be set up for them when they get there. So.
And I do. I didn't beta read everybody's story in this one just because not everyone needed it or wanted it, but Navin, because we're buds and we do that for each other anyway, and we're sort of at the same part in our career. I actually beta read this one for him, and I remember, aside from questioning some of his grammar style, just because British grammar is slightly different than American, if you're not familiar, which is not to say it's wrong, it's just it's different in some minor ways. So other than those issues, because I wasn't sure if it was right or not, and I'm not a grammar person anyway. That's why
you were going to say Nazi?
I caught myself, but I hire editors for a reason to fix that. But one of the things I did remember sending clearly was I was like, dude, this needs to be a novel. Like, why can't I buy the book? Because it's a good story. It's compelling.
Thank you.
So what was the inspiration for this short story?
Well, the particular inspiration for the short story, now this is a story full of gimmicks, and I apologize to readers who may be looking for perhaps a little more than what the characters are wrestling with. They have one central problem, and I try to make them likable characters. But that's really all there is to it. They are a vessel filled with gimmicks. And the central gimmick is something that I came up with that I think, as far as I know, I am the first person to discuss the use of a black hole in this way. I call them sun satellites, where what you do is you make a tiny black hole, a very, very tiny black hole, and then you have iron screens orbiting it. Now, once you make a black hole small, all black holes are small. If you make a black hole with very little mass, what you get is a very tiny event horizon, a very small area which you want to stay away from. But because it's small, the radiation it emits through Hawking radiation is very short wavelength. And that's what's dangerous. That's what kills us. Large wavelength radiation, we call those radio waves. So those will go right through, you won't even notice. But short wavelength, that's what's wrecking DNA. That's what's, melting things. That's the really high intense cosmic radiation. So you have a tiny black hole, which doesn't take a lot of mass, maybe the mass of, say, a destroyer, a few thousand tons. You hide it with screens of iron, because iron is a very high melting point, and it's cheap, it's everywhere. And you pump it. You pump the liquid iron, which is glowing hot, out to the outside of these plates, which are orbiting the black hole. And they're going to give off that heat against the vacuum of space. They'll give it off in light and heat. And basically what you do is you create a step-down transformer, where you're taking the very, very short wavelength, high-intensity Hawking radiation from the black hole and stepping it down to something that is much more survivable, visible light, heat. And what that gives you is a small sun. So I want to write about an alien race that we only know is there because of their relics. And instead of them colonizing solar systems and fighting over suns, they just went for all these rogue worlds, which are out there in the gaps between stars. There may be as many as half of all the planets ever created in our galaxy may be these rogue worlds spinning way off between stars. They just go to these things, and they put up these small sun satellites around them, which slowly heat them up and turn their ices into oceans and terraform them. So that was the inspiration. I wanted to use that.
Okay. So does this story stand alone, or does it fit in a larger universe?
It fits in a larger universe. I wrote a book called Burning Eagle, which is an introduction to this universe, where people are dealing with these post-human intelligences, and some of them are allies, but some may not be allies, and the awkwardness of that. And that is full-on military science fiction. It's a universe which also has more of an action-adventure component, like Planet 9 is part of the same universe, and that's a little less military, a little more action-adventure. But Burning Eagle is a full-on military science fiction. And the Battle of Purple is set slightly after the events of Burning Eagle.
So was that the Reader's Digest version synopsis, or is there more you want to tell us about the Burning Eagle universe, or do you feel like you covered it?
Let's call out the Reader's Digest version, yeah.
Okay.
Because otherwise it would have a ridiculous version. That would take too long and waste everyone's time. Nobody wants to hear that.
All right. Well, then how about this? We will link your episode where we interviewed you about Burning Eagle in the show notes. So if people want to hear him talk even more about that universe in a lot more depth, you can do that. So given that this story is a military science fiction, is the larger universe that it fits into as well?
I would say the large universe it fits into... That's a tough question. I would say it's more action-adventure oriented, but you can bring military science fiction into anything. So whenever I write in this universe, whether I like it or not, I'll end up drawn to this point where I go, you know what? It's time to have a big combined arms conflict. I want artillery, I want spacecraft, I want infantry, I want tanks, I want mortars. I want them all to be there. I want them all to make sense. And that happens. So I end up writing military science fiction whether I like it or not. I do mean like it or not because I wrote this one book which was supposed to be about 10 explorers on a spaceship, and ended up being 10 explorers on a really big spaceship with an infantry company with them, with support assets, because I really wanted to write about them going into a fight. And so I did. So, yeah.
So even when it's not dead on the nose mill SF, it has the themes and characters. Fair enough.
It has the themes and characters, yes.
So what is it about the subgenre that appeals to you, that draws you in every time?
Military science fiction?
Yes.
I think it's because of what I've done for a career. I'm a miniature painter, and a lot of what we do are war game miniatures. And a lot of it is Warhammer, Flames of War, World War II stuff. And the stuff that I'm most interested in are the World War II painting and the Flames of, and the modern near future stuff. And I'm not interested in the flash and the pomp. I'm interested in the gritty details, like how many people are going to be in an infantry platoon, what the support weapons are going to have, what's everyone's jobs. And I found that very interesting. And I feel that if I'm going to put conflict into a story and I'm going to go for a big conflict, I may as well be able to write it well. And a big influence there is who's this gentleman? He's a British science fiction writer. He's also Warhammer. Everyone has talked about him. Sorry, it's a bit late over here on this end, and my memory goes a bit by the end of the evening.
Are you talking Dan Abnett?
Dan Abnett, that's our man, yes. Dan Abnett has been a big inspiration there, because he was the first writer I encountered who could write about a large conflict and do so in a way that was inspiring and interesting to read. And he helped influence me to start writing about that. I very much want to write about military science fiction, and Dan Abnett has been my guide.
Okay. So carrying that on as we wrap this pony up, if you could serve in any military science fiction unit from any franchise, where would you serve and why?
Okay. You're going to think less of me for this, JR, but I'm going to accept that. I'm going to live with it, right? Now, all the military units that I think are badass, I would never want to be close to, because they're in horrible universes where the stakes are beyond measuring, and most of them are probably going to die or expected to die. So, instead, I have found the perfect solution. I would like to be in the Psi Corps of the Federal Army in Starship Troopers, because they're far away from all the horror, but they still have serious work to do. Right?
Fair enough. So you are not the only one who considered livability as part of what they listed. So okay, Rick Partlow, for instance, said Starfleet because no one ever dies unless they wear red shirts. And J.R. Castle came up with B.V. Larson's Undying Mercenary because if you die, they just print you a new body.
Okay, as long as I'm not the most cowardly. If I can be in good company as a cowardly person in this, I'm okay.
No, it's certainly, some authors are jerks. Like what's one of the things when Chris and I did our interview, one of the things we said was that I would not want to live, as much as I love the Emberverse, I would not want to live under his stuff, because he's a real jerk to his characters. I'm like, man, I'd die in the first week.
Horrendous.
I don't know that I'd live through basic training. But yeah, anyway. So no. You stand among the greats who considered that when they listed.
Perfect.
I think Richard Fox and Scott Moon were the only two that didn't factor in whether they were going to die to their answers.
Never cross those men. Never cross those men.
Those are the ones that are like, no, just bring it on. That didn't hurt enough. So all right. So Navin, as we wrap this up, can you tell listeners how they can find you? And as always, the links will be in the show notes.
They can find me if they go to my website, which is sci-fi-navin.com. Or they can also find me on Twitter, where I am at sci-fi Navin.
Outstanding, and we'll link to all of that as well as your first interview. I believe you were like episode 60 or something. And you can find us, dear listener, at our website, www.sfshenanigans.com. Our Twitter is at SF S_show, Sierra Foxtrot Sierra _show. Wow, I'm stumbling over my words, people. I don't even have the excuse that it's really, really late here because it's not. Our email is podcast@sfshenanigans.com. And our Facebook group is facebook.com/groups/sfshenanigans. Thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Chris Winder, I'm J.R. Handley, and this was the Sci-Fi Shenanigans Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of space and all things that go boom.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that archived episode that was in the digital memory hole that we found. We thought you'd enjoy it. So thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Nick Garber and Doc Cisca, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the archive for the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back at our regular scheduled time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom.